Hello, BookTube. June is right around the corner. Doesn't feel like it. Here in Boston, I've actually got a sweatshirt on, but nevertheless, June is what, less than 2 weeks away. And June starts the summer on BookTube, and the summer on BookTube is the summer of George. It's full of events. Now, I want to talk about four things that are coming up in June and kind of show you how I plan to start them. The first event is starting before. The first event will be going on the whole month of June, and that is Classics and Company, which is a wonderful, really kind of unusual BookTube event that was created by Ann Novella and Micah Cummins, where they take some kind of work of literature, whether it's a canonical classic or a new canonical classic, and discuss it for roughly 90 days. And they bring on a guest in each case for each book. That's a wonderful program. And starting now, so it will be a June event because they'll definitely be doing it in June, is this book right here, The Memoirs of Hadrian by Marguerite Yourcenar. This is an English language translation that came out 40 years ago, thereabouts, by Grace Frick in collaboration with the author. And Micah and Novella are doing this with Janet Remembers Reads, but they've also added me as a co-host for this book. And this is a historical novel, one of the most popular historical novels of the last century. Very much in line with two or three of the other most popular historical novels of the last century, in that it is Roman historical fiction. This is the structure of the book is that it is a memoir, a letter written by the Emperor Hadrian to a man who will be his successor in time, to a young boy named Marcus Aurelius. This is not to be confused with Hadrian's own memoir, which he wrote and does not survive, unfortunately. The impression left behind by the ripples in the wake of that book is that it would have been really interesting to read. Maybe a lot more interesting than the memoir written by Hadrian's predecessor, Trajan, who of course didn't write a word of his own memoir. It would probably have been a very boring state propaganda type thing. Hadrian's memoir seems a little more personable, and this book, a fictional version of that memoir, is 10 times more personable. You're deep inside the thoughts of an aging Emperor Hadrian. It's a terrific book. It really is. I was very happy to see it on the roster for Classics and Company. And I don't know this will be dominating Classics and Company for June. And they have a Discord. If you're comfortable with Discord, go over and you could be discussing this thing. I haven't yet decided what I want to do with this book in June myself. I will definitely be rereading it, but I don't know, and I'll be rereading it in this edition. I don't think that I will use this trade paperback because I started and it was creaking. So I have an ebook of this translation. I think I'll probably just do that instead. But I don't know what I will be doing in terms of participating in Classics and Company, because even though I am under the crushing weight of the heavens for the summer, even so, I make more BookTube content than most BookTubers do. I tend to make as much BookTube content in a day as most BookTubers make in a week. And I don't want to flood Classics and Company with all kinds of Hadrianana or anything like that. So I'll have to see. I'll confer with my co-hosts and see what I can and cannot do, what I should and should not do. But I wanted to recommend this and recommend the Discord for Classics and Company in case you want company reading this. I know a lot of you have this on your shelves and just have never got to it. It is well worth your time to get to. So that's thing number one. And then thing number two has not yet been officially announced by our dauntless captain, Vin at Revenant Reads, but Book Trek is making a return to BookTube for its, I think this is the third year in a row, where we are celebrating Star Trek fiction, which exists in innumerable multitudes. Star Trek fiction has, in the last 10 years, slowed to a trickle. It's now a very big deal to get a Star Trek novel. There are like 3 a year or fewer than that. But once upon a time, it was a torrent, a raging torrent. So there's an enormous amount of Star Trek fiction out there to read and reread. And that's what Book Trek is. There's no real stricture one way or another. If you read a Star Trek novel this summer, and summer is the perfect time to read a Star Trek novel, then you have participated. in Book Trek. There are away missions that you can do for Book Trek. I'm also a host for Book Trek. There are away missions that you can do where you read a work of science, not science fiction. And those are a lot of fun. I'm not going to make a TBR of those particular away missions because science is one of the new release categories that I religiously read anyway. So not just in June, but for the whole summer, I will be reading all the major new releases from the major houses in the American book market for science books. As many kinds as I get my hands on. I have my favorites, of course. I'm a NASA kid, so I love astronomy releases, but I also never miss a book on evolutionary science. So, but Book Trek is going to go on all summer, and I will be doing with Book Trek. Unlike with Classics and Company, with Book Trek, when it comes to Star Trek, I don't have much in the way of self-control. So I'm not going to bother to ask my co-host how many videos I can make. I'll probably make quite a few videos. But one of the things I'm going to start with for June is a systematic reread, which you absolutely do not have to do. There's nothing systematic about Book Trek. But I want to reread all of James Blish, the British science fiction author who was tasked with writing up the scripts for the TV shows. In these things, you may remember these classic old covers. I'm going to reread all of the James Blish short stories. Now, partly that is just a thing that I'm going to do for June. I've been meaning to do that. I have these book club editions of the Blish volumes. There are 4 of them. I'm going to go through all of those because I don't like to have print and paper books that I don't actually read. I have all of these things in ebook, but I got these in Vermont years ago and have not actually gone through them and turn the pages, to read the book itself. So I'm going to do that. And part of the reason is just to get me back into Star Trek, and I'll be doing a ton more Star Trek reading. But another part is because I want to give another go at James Blish as an author. So I'm going to read these, which are not at all representative of his work. I don't like this author, but even I am willing to, of course, to admit that. These are not at all representative of his work. But they are representative, as anything a writer writes can't help but be, of his tone. So I will, in addition to starting Book Trek with Blish in June, I'll be using this as a way to ease in to rereading all of his stuff, none of which has ever done anything for me. I know that a lot of people like his science fiction, and a lot of people over the decades, whose science fiction opinions I respect, have said, no, you're just missing something here. So he's not an author where I say, all right, well, I've done my due diligence on this author and he stinks. Instead, there's a question mark. I'm willing to go at this again, so I will. But that's going to be my Book Trek plan for June. Because I'm not going to go gangbusters on this thing. I will probably make a lot of videos, but I have a task weighing on my sexy A-frame shoulders. So I don't know how much time I will give to Star Trek reading, but there'll be this and a bunch of other stuff, but this is at least a start for June. Will be James Blish. Then the next event in June, for those of you who care, is the Steve Tiberius Donahue book club. I have a book club on this channel where we pick a book every month and talk about it. And June is a busy month. It's got lots and lots of events. And I know that. So I had a book originally picked for June, and then a combination of things that people were saying, my own inclinations, and a look at the busy calendar for June on BookTube actually made me redo my plans. And I have redone my plans. So for June, for the STD Book Club, we will be reading this, Bring Up the Bodies by Hilary Mantel. This is the second book in her Cromwell series that started with Wolf Hall, which was the first book that we read for the Steve Tiberius Donahue Book Club. We're going to do the trilogy. I don't know if we'll do it. We won't do it back to back. I don't know how fast we'll do it. But the next book we're going to do for the Steve Tiberius Donahue Book Club for June is Bring Up the Bodies. So you have time to get a copy. If you're having a hard time getting a copy, feel free to let me know, and I can find a copy for you, an ebook or a print book. But we have 2 weeks for you to get that and get geared up, especially those of you who did go through Wolf Hall, who did read Wolf Hall with us. You'll know, but I will situate you. I will make a video to situate you for Bring Up the Bodies. You do not need to read Wolf Hall to read Bring Up the Bodies. I don't think you need to anyway, but even if you get the impression that you do, I will make a video that will be all that you need. Also, a Wikipedia summary would be all that you need as well. So that's the next Steve Tiberius Donahue book thing. Baby, what are you doing? You're going to go up there? Oh, that's where Frida makes an appearance. Very good. she's not happy with this chilly weather. Not at all. She's not happy with hot weather either. It's hard to make her happy. But anyway, and then the final event of the 4 that I want to talk about for June is, of course, the one that's on all of your mind, which is June on the Range, which was an event created last year by Michael K. Vaughan, designed to celebrate Westerns, designed to celebrate a subgenre of fiction that used to rule the ranch. Westerns used to be the thing. Westerns and, of course, romances, which we don't. The genre that dare not speak its name. But if you leave romance out, romance has always been the best-selling genre. Okay, always. If you think that's not true, if you think, well, if you go back far enough, well, actually, Dickens was handily outselling. No, Dickens was outselling the other the mainstream Victorian novels. He was not outselling the romance authors at all, and he knew it. He makes many jokes about that in his books, as does Trollope, as do all the others. And that has stayed true. It was true in the 20th century. It's true in the 21st century. But leaving romance aside, for a long stretch of time in the 20th century, Westerns were the dominant genre. They're gone now, almost completely, except ironically. But once upon a time, that wasn't true. And it was a great idea on Mike's part to make a BookTube event, and it took off. Everybody loved it. Everybody loved June on the Range. I was one of the original co-hosts, and I'm co-hosting again this year. And Westerns typically are neither long books nor, shall we say, demanding books. Most of once the genre became really hot, people started churning it out. They started churning out examples of Westerns very quickly and huge numbers. What's the matter, me little baby? Huh? You got up there, now you want to come down again? You want to come down from there? Ophelia, you can't just loom there behind me like that. I guess they don't care if you do or not. What are you doing, baby? Huh? You're just looming there. It's very odd. Like my own Roger Hotep. Do you want to come down from there? Huh? Come down here. You're being weird. All right. Well, she can go ahead and be weird here. I will block her. Oh, there we go. Oh, there we go. No Frida yoga. She bounced right down to the ground. I wanted to show you what I'm going to be doing for the first week of June on the Range. June on the Range is just June. Read a Western, then you have participated in June on the Range. There's a rough outline. If you want rough outlines, this is not a prescriptive thing at all. The rough outline is to read a Louis L'Amour and a Zane Grey. The two, best-selling and most popular Western authors. If you want a rough outline, it would be that. At some point during the month, read a book by one of those two. That is all. But I plan on doing a lot more than that. So I want to show you, I'm going to read for the first week in June, I'm going to read almost all of the Westerns that I have in paper form. I have a ton of Westerns in ebooks. And there'll be a ton of Westerns that I will find between now and then and during the course of June. But I want to show you, we've seen all of these in Brattle Mail Halls, but here they are all together. This one is by, the nice thing about this is a lot of these are not by the same authors. So I'll be getting a lot of authors. One is Outlaw Doc by David King. Then North to Montana by Steve Lawrence. We have The Hungry Gun by Steve Thurman. These great old Westerns. A lot of times these things would end up in just giant box bins at secondhand stores. Secondhand bookstores used to proliferate back before rents went through the roof. So you could get a secondhand bookstore that would have a basement full of boxes overflowing with old paperbacks. And a lot of times the crusty guys that ran those shops would just write something on the cover in terms of price or whatever. So you just have to put up with that with these things. When you find them secondhand, it's a miracle that they exist at all. They weren't printed to last. And then we have Max Brand. This is The Long Chase. Let's see here. John Daniels, The Crossing. Tall in the West by Veckel Howard. I'm going to learn all about these authors. Don't know anything about it either. We have Tex by Clarence Mulford. Got one right in the gut there. But then also OU Tex. This is OU Tex by William McLeod Rain. Burton Rasco praised this. No, he has no name recognition now. Then we have Bradford Scott, Bullets for a Ranger. Many Rivers to Cross by Steve Frazee. I think I read Bullets for the Ranger already. This is rereads I'm perfectly up for. We have The Third Rider by Barry Cord, which I think I've already read that. I will check with the June on the Range videos that I made last year so that I don't do a whole video on a book a second time. And then we have Harsh Reckoning by Phil Ketchum. Very strange Western cover there. We have a double edition, an Ace Double. I'm hoping to find more of these. The Ace Doubles feel like the quintessential way to read a Western. We have The Hanging at Whiskey Smith by Eric Allen. You can just see this has been battered all to hell, eaten by mice. And then when you flip it over, you have another Western. Stranger in Rampart by Dan Stevens. Shadow Mountain by Bliss Lomax. These things are barely holding on, but I got all of them specifically for June on the Range. We have The Bleeding Land by Giles Lutz. Oh, somebody had to tape the cover back on that one. West of Devil's Canyon by Richard Poole. Every bit as old as The Bleeding Land, but in perfect condition, like the day it came off the spinner rack at the drugstore. We have Bitter Sage by Frank Gruber. He is in the act of disappearing. We have Day of the Gun, which is a Wyoming Jones story by Richard Telfair. We have Land Grabbers, again by Dan Stevens. Did we already see Dan Stevens? I think we did. Land Grabbers. And finally, Chant of the Hawk by John and Margaret Harris. A very rare occurrence of a woman's name on a Western. So that's a huge pile of Westerns that I'll be doing for June on the Range, but I imagine I'll be doing a lot of other things too. For instance, none of these is very long, and I like long books, so I might find a couple of longer Westerns as well. And none of these, to put it mildly, have entered the ranks as classics of the Western genre. I might read one of those or reread one of those as well, but that's this will start me off. This will be just fine for June. It's possible that this task that I have weighing on my sexy A-frame shoulders is so great, will be so time-consuming, that these are all that I can read for June. That's all I'm going to do for June on the Range. I hope not, because there's a lot of stuff out there. But anyway, I want to encourage you to join all of these June events. I know that June is a thickly populated month just anyway, and I'm sure there are lots of other BookTube events that I'm not mentioning. But these are all going to be fun. Memoirs of Hadrian, how long have you had that thing on your to-read list? You could get it off your list now and read it for Classics and Company. Bring Up the Bodies. Quite a few of you had Wolf Hall staring at you from your shelves forever and ever. And then finally you read it because we were reading it together. And there's a sequel, and there's a sequel after that, and they are brilliant. They are absolutely brilliant books on their own. What's the harm in reading a whole trilogy? I don't know that we'll get to The Mirror and the Light this summer because I'll want to switch things up a bit, but still. And there's Book Trek, which Star Trek is a bit of a niche ask for a lot of you. A lot of you don't read science fiction, so you're certainly not going to read Star Trek. But a lot of you like Star Trek, the shows. That might be inducement. Some of this stuff is very entertaining to read. And finally, the biggest one of them all, June on the Range, where you'll be reading Westerns and having a lot of fun. I will almost certainly be doing chatty, analytical videos about all of these things and just sucking the fun right out of them. But anyway, there's some upcoming announcements for June for this crowded summer. So I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.